So, Copyright 101 in the business of jazz, the business of music. I wanted to welcome you to the very first Gen Conference where we have an entirely business track. So in addition to this session that's looking at copyright law as a business issue, we also have others. And if this is something that is of particular interest to you, we have formed a committee within Gen, the Jazz Industry and Music Business Committee, and we have a meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. It's in the guidebook, so you can check the location. But tomorrow at 1 o'clock, you can come out and give your thoughts about how you'd like to see business issues addressed at the annual Gen conferences, as well as in general, as a member benefit, what would you like to see Gen do, and come and be a part of that planning. So just a little plug for that. So when we think about business, and I don't really hear this mic, so I guess I don't hear it.
We can hear you here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we think about business and intersections of business and jazz, and specifically intersections of copyright law and jazz, there are many ways that we might identify those intersections. So I'm going to start with one at the artist level, the individual artist level. I'm going to start with a jazz artist whom maybe is a little bit controversial within the world of jazz. Depends on your perspective. One thing that is not controversial is his success with respect to monetizing his artistic work. Do you know who I'm talking about? I am talking about Kenny G. So, let's start with a little quote, which you can see it here on the screen, but I'm going to narrate it for you a little bit. This is an old issue, so for those of you who are familiar, you know where it comes from. I'm not showing at this moment where it comes from, but I certainly won't leave that a mystery. Kenny G became one of the few people on earth I can say that I really can't use at all. As a man, for his incredible arrogance to even consider such a thing, and as a musician, for presuming to share the stage with the single most important figure in our music, I'm also amazed that there hasn't already been an outcry against this among music critics. Where are they? That was said by Pat Metheny with respect to Kenny G's 1999 recording, in which he incorporated portions of What a Wonderful World into his own recording, which most of you, if not all of you, are familiar. So, without getting into whether this is a verified account, did Pat Metheny really say this, what is the reason that he said it, let's leave all of that aside.
I heard him say it at an IAJE presentation.
Okay. All right, so that's one form of verification. So I also wanted to look at this because I'm interested in exploring the whole array of business issues as they relate to jazz, and I've been working on a study comparing Kenny G to Thelonious Monk. Yes, I am doing that comparison. And thinking about this whole thing of the purist versus the quote-unquote sellout in parentheses, so I'm not suggesting that Kenny G is a sellout. But anyways, looking at the two artistic personalities, and so that's where I explore that, and I'm just giving myself credit for exploring that, so that's why that's there. But yeah, this is verified, he really did say it. So Pat Metheny is raising this in the context of the artistic issue. He asked specifically where are the critics on this, on his artistry. Why am I raising it in the context of copyright law? Because I want to raise the question in the context of copyright law. You could have an outcry in which you say, art should be enjoyed, used in certain ways that respect the art form. And that's one way to look at it. But another way to look at this issue of an outcry is, so from a legal standpoint, from a copyright law standpoint, should there be an outcry? In other words, is it okay from a legal standpoint, not an artistic one, for Kenny G to have done this sampling, essentially is what he did. Is that okay? That's what we're going to explore. That's an example of an intersection between jazz and law. How will we do that sort of exploration? We need a vocabulary in which to have this dialogue. So that's where the fundamentals of copyright law come in, to give us some kind of vocabulary to take to this. Starting with background and purpose and some general copyright terminologies, just so that we're all on the same page. And if we're looking at law, copyright or any other body of law, we've got to go back to the Constitution to get background and to get purpose. And so we do. And we come to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8 of the Constitution, which is also known as the Patent and Copyright Clause. So we've got language in here that specifically is meant to invoke patent law, which we're not dealing with today. So as you read that and you look at the language that talks about inventors and discoveries, that's not our, focal point for today, but the copyright message is there. And so in this section of the Constitution is actually speaking to Congress and telling Congress what it can do and what it can't do. Specifically, it can, of course, we know that Congress's job is to make laws, though these days that seems to be a challenge for our current Congress to do, but that's their job, is to make laws. And so they are empowered by the Constitution to make laws about copyright, so long as the laws that they make serve this mission. And so the 1976 Copyright Act, which is our current enactment of copyright law, is supposed to serve this mission, and so are all of its amendments are supposed to serve this mission. And there is a little bit of a tension even within that purpose to promote the progress of science and the useful arts by giving these exclusive rights to authors and securing those rights for limited amounts of time. There is a tension there, and therein lies a conceptual intersection between jazz and copyright law. The conceptual intersection is the point at which controversies develop, and there are many controversies that develop. All of us probably like the idea of copyright, everybody in this room, to the extent that you are an author or you appreciate the sanctity of authorship rights, you appreciate the fact that in that clause we find that artists are going to get some rights. Good, we all love that. Is that all that it says? That's not all that it says. It says that there's a reason that we're going to give rights to authors, and that is so that somebody besides authors, those of us who want to see a progressive society, who want to see YouTube technology that certainly has copyright works, posted to it, of those of us who maybe want to be a Kenny G and incorporate our works in the works of masters, those of us who want to be able to progress in that way, there's the rub sometimes. That intersection can be a conflict. So when we think about these intersections and what should be a proper intersection, here's where we have to return and recognize that there is a tension built in and that there is some balance. And I'm sort of editorializing. I personally believe that there's a balance that needs to be struck. Authors have rights, but not to the exclusion of all other realities that society has to manage. So that's our background in terms of purpose. And then in terms of terminologies, this is a short list of copyright law terminologies. It could be a much longer list, but we have 50 minutes. So I've identified a few that are practical, that seem to come up over and over and over again, and that I'm guessing that those of you in this room might be most interested in. And if and when I hope we have times for questions, we can go beyond this list. So what we're going to define today is all the terms that you see here, which I'm not going to read so that we have time to define them. But here's where I'd like to start and not presume about definitions and what needs to be defined. Question. So, is the answer to this question yes or no? I offer it rhetorically. If someone wants to answer the question, you should feel free to do that. But I'm offering it rhetorically. Is that what a copyright is? Is that what I've always thought that a copyright is? And am I confident in terms of whether that is what it is or isn't? It helps to be sure. In the music industry in particular, I think that we use terminologies very, very loosely. And in my experience with students and as a practitioner, that's just what people do, and they go on what they've heard. But the law suggests that this wouldn't be the best definition of copyright. It's not an entirely inaccurate definition. It just doesn't get us where we need to be with respect to business and understanding copyright. From a business perspective, copyright is simply, as the name suggests, a set of legal rights for creative works to offer the opportunity to exploit those works in whatever ways that the owner of these rights chooses to do. So if you refer to your book, I meant to bring my book with me, Music Copyright Law, of which I am an author. Yes, shameless plug. I meant to bring it with me. But just because I hold that book in my hand and I lawfully purchased it from Amazon or a bookstore or wherever I got it from, doesn't mean that I am the owner of the copyrights. We all know that. The books that we purchase, the music we purchase, the sound recordings, the paintings, that just because we own the material object doesn't mean that we own the rights that are embodied in that material object. And so, yeah, I'm very specific about what I mean and what the law means when it says copyright. It's a set of rights. And so we want to go beyond just thinking about it as a song or a work. I saw a hand back there. Yes?
Yeah, is there any way we would be able to get a copy of this PowerPoint at some point, or is that copyrighted?
I don't think that there's anything in here that I'm uncomfortable sharing. Okay. So if the key is getting me to remember to do it. Yes. So if you will give me a reminder, I'd be happy to. You see my email address is here, so you're welcome. It's at the very bottom, and you're welcome to use that as a way to remind me that you want to get a copy. You can also purchase the book. Another shameless plug. Okay, so why only sort of? I just explained it in terms of being more specific. So what rights are we talking about? We know copyright is a set of legal rights for creative works. Right of attribution, is that one of the exclusive rights for copyright? What do I mean by right of attribution? Let's say the right to have your name associated with your work. Is that an exclusive right that you have under U.S. copyright law? Yay or nay? Nay. That is not a right that you have under U.S. copyright law. That's a moral right. And we really don't have moral rights in the United States. In a very, very narrow sense for visual art, and not even all visual arts works. So, can you get it some other way? Yeah. Other bodies of law? Yeah. Contract law? Yes, but not through copyright law. No. The right to receive royalties for others' uses of your works, is that one of your exclusive rights? It depends. That really is more of a reflection on how you use your exclusive rights. And I just point that out because when I'm in discussions with students, clients, and we sort of get to the bottom line, how do you recognize who is the copyright owner? Whoever receives the royalties. Not necessarily. Nobody may receive royalties, but there may still be a copyright owner. So it depends on how you control the work. But only the copyright owner has the right to control the work. Am I required to share my rights with others? No. I can. If the work is a joint work, which I will define in a moment. If the work is a joint work, then I've already shared the work because it's a joint work. Other than that, no, I have no responsibility to share my legal rights with anybody else. Does copyright law protect ideas? I think that this is the thing that most people are familiar with. Copyright law does not protect ideas except ideas that become something other than an idea. A song is an idea that has taken shape and become fixed. So just thinking about what the rights are, how can we know what the rights are? The law tells us they're enumerated. Specifically, in section 106 of the copyright statute, we have a list of the rights, and that's how we know. If the right's not on the list, the right doesn't exist. Maybe oversimplification, but that's a fact. Is if the right's not on the list, it doesn't exist. So these are the rights, and these are rights that are exclusive rights, and so I've underlined exclusive to suggest exclusive means in the copyright sense what it means in every other sense, really. If you are in an exclusive dating relationship, that means it's you and that one other person. It's one-on-one to the exclusion of all others. And it's the same with copyright law. It means, very simply, and this answers a lot of questions about what non-copyright owners can do with somebody else's work. The copyright owner has the exclusive right, meaning that owner and only that owner, to do these things with the work. Period. End of story. Simple, easy. And so if I want to use someone else's work, instead of thinking about a use as an abstract concept, I think of it as I want to perform someone else's work, or display it, or distribute it, or adapt it, or create a derivative work from it. Then that helps me to understand whether or not I can use somebody else's work if I define what that use is. Problem is, sometimes maybe I don't know what a performance is. There is a specific technical definition of what a performance is in the copyright statute, and it's not just, I am performing sort of now, kind of, to the extent that this is a work I'm performing. But that definition sometimes is elusive, and that's where we maybe come into confusion as to whether I can use somebody else's work. What does it mean to display? What does it mean to adapt? So to the extent that I understand what these rights are, as a user, I understand that these are uses that belong exclusively to the exclusion of all others, to the copyright owner. And that answers a lot of questions about what I as a user can and cannot do. As a copyright owner, clearly these are the things that I, the one and only me, copyright owner, do. Yes?
If I'm a teacher, am I allowed to create an arrangement and play it with my band in my school, but not charge any money for it?
Yes, so I'm going to actually, can you hang on to that question for a second? Okay. Don't let me forget. I'm going to hit on that, I think, and if I don't answer that exact question, then let me know. I'll answer that exact question. Yes. Thank you. Okay. So how to acquire copyright ownership? 3 ways to become a copyright owner. 3 ways. So all other ways that you hear about are not at issue. There are only 3 ways to create. Copyright law is about creation and wanting to encourage all of us to create so you can create something. Author equals owner. So authorship starts with an idea in your head. I want to write a song about being happy. That's not a jazz tune. But I want to write a song about being happy. I have the idea. That's not a work. I have to combine that with creating that work in a tangible way. In other words, it has to come out of my mind and into the physical world and be fixed, is the word that the copyright statute uses. Fixed, embodied in some material object that can be perceived by others and reproduced by others and communicated. And as long as that happens, whether I choose to do that by recording it or writing it on a piece of paper, however I choose to fix my work, now we've got a work, an idea that's come out of the physical world, fixed. I'm an author, I created it, fixed it. That's one way. Second way, of course, is to receive ownership from somebody else, just a transfer. Yes?
I'm sorry, does it have to be recorded?
You can use any technology that will allow for the perceiving, reproducing, and communicating of that work.
Do you have to
So,
send the sheet music somewhere, or it's just if you do it at home and now it's copyrighted automatically?
well, so when you use the term copyrighted, I will resist
Okay.
and say fixation. So at the moment that you fix it in whatever medium you
Yeah.
choose, copyright law doesn't try to tell you what that medium should be, because we can't see the future. Thank goodness Congress knew it couldn't see the future. And so it just said, here are the things that constitute fixation. And as long as the technology that you use will accomplish these things, can we tell that there's something there? Can we in some way connect with it as part of the tangible work? Can we see it? Can we hear it? And can we reproduce it? Can we communicate your work? As long as that's true, you can use whatever technology you want. So, of course, when the 1976 Copyright Act was written, digital technology didn't exist. So thank goodness that the copyright statute wasn't so specific about what would be a tangible medium. An MP3 file is a tangible medium of expression, even though we can't touch it or see it, because it meets those criteria of being able to, we can perceive what's captured in the MP3 file. Hope I answered your question.
No.
Well,
You don't have to send it anywhere? How do you establish if somebody else does the same thing, who wrote it first?
yeah, so your question was about fixation. And so fixation takes place when you cause your work to be embodied in a material
I
object,
got that.
period. You don't have to send it anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. So, other ways to become an owner of a work, transfer of ownership, receiving rights from somebody else, and lastly, works made for hire. So you don't have to do all of these things, it's one or the other. You can choose. I create my own work, I'm an author of it, as long as I have fixed it and it has a certain amount of originality, minimal degree of creativity, and I didn't copy it from anybody else. I'm the author. Transfer of ownership's got to be in writing, so that's how ownership gets transferred. Work made for hire, two different types of work made for hire. I can commission someone to do the work for me, and even though that person will create the song, the book, the painting, I will own it, as long as I comply with the statutory requirements for that type of work made for hire. And the other type of work made for hire is employment work made for hire. I'm an employer, I employ you to create works for me, and even though you create them, I will own them as long as the work is created within the scope of your employment, as part of your employment. So those are the three ways that you become a copyright owner. Yes, sir?
Hate to beat this, but I just want to clarify. So number one, I create a piece of music, I write it down, I put a copyright sign at the bottom, and that's copyrighted. Do I have to send, it's not like a patent where you have to go and send it somewhere and get a patent for it.
No, you don't.
So it's copyrighted as soon as I put the little on it.
Right, yes. So let's do something else. I'll just answer questions, maybe, if that's what you would prefer.
No, that's
But then, because I anticipate that question
okay.
and was planning to answer it, but I'm going to answer it now. So when we get to it, I won't have to. So registration does not provide ownership, and lack of registration does not deny ownership. It has nothing to do with ownership, and it has nothing to do with the copyrightability of your work. So the way to create a work or to become a copyright owner of a work are very, very simple. Yeah. So it's a myth that registration somehow creates ownership or ownership rights. Yes.
Maybe I can clarify for some people. From what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the difference is between, now what she's saying is legally registration does not confirm ownership. However, if you want to make a lawsuit over that copyright, it does need to be registered in the Library of Congress.
Yes, that's
So
correct.
that's
So
the
registration, so as I said, I was planning to cover that. Registration does give certain rights. But ownership is not one of them. It's not one of the rights that you get. It allows you, it gives certain benefits. And one of them is that you cannot sue for copyright infringement if your work's not registered. But you're still the owner of that work. if you acquired ownership in any of the ways that you can acquire ownership.
What if two people claim it at the same, like,
Yes.
down the road?
It has happened. So it's a presumption. When you register a work, you are registering a claim of ownership, but it is a rebuttable presumption, meaning it can be challenged. And so whoever the plaintiff is has the burden of, challenging the presumption of the other person. But the other person gets the right to challenge the presumption if they are both claiming ownership.
Thank you.
Yes, you're quite welcome. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, if someone commissions me to write an arrangement and it's their, and now that's their chart, correct? You said if someone hires me, it's their property,
Yes.
and they decide to sell it, I get like nothing from that because it's theirs.
Well, it depends on what you arrange with them. So you could arrange that, I would be happy to create this work that you would like for me to through this commission arrangement, but I'm not going to do it for free. So you're going to pay me, but you retain the rights. They retain the right to the work, but that doesn't mean that you don't get anything for it if that's what you've arranged. In other words, you could say, I want a flat fee, and that's all you'll ever get. You won't get any future income that might have been
Yeah.
created because you have no right to create the future income.
Okay.
In the back.
And in his example, if he's interested in retaining his copyright, he could then still contractually arrange for that. He could say, I'm willing to create this for you, but I'm not willing to be a work for hire. So I'll be happy to give you an exclusive license.
It's a derivative of somebody
Well,
else's.
so then, yeah, that's not a work for hire at that point. So if you're saying that as part of the negotiation, he says, I don't want to do a work for hire at all, then it's not a work for hire. That's true. So the work could be created and he could transfer the rights to the person who wants to do the commissioning, but then that's not work for hire. And different rights would attach at that point.
Right? Just
There would be
break
different
the-
rights.
It seems like he felt like anytime someone comes to him to commission something, he would always end up being work for hire. But I was just trying to.
Yeah, I don't know if that was what you were asking or
You
not.
kind of, you answered it in the sense that they would retain the rights for, so if they sold it or had made any income off of it in the future, I would have no rights to that. I would only get the flat fee.
Right.
But I
If
was,
it's-
I was talking about like royalties, I guess, in the
Right.
sense that
That's
it's not
income.
mine. It's,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
can't put that on a contract, like, you commission me, but I still have the royalties to it if you sell it or something.
You could, yeah, you can negotiate that if you want.
Okay.
Sure, you can negotiate whatever you want, but you will not be the owner of the work if it is created as a work made for hire.
Okay.
So whatever you negotiate will determine what you actually get.
Yeah.
Copyright law will not give you anything.
Mm.
Yes, in the back.
I'm really learning and loving the presentation. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
She's raised a situation that has come up a lot with a lot of my former students, and if you can amplify this, this will really help me. My understanding is, let's say that Bill is commissioned by a local symphony orchestra to arrange, or George Gershwin to which Bill has no rights to, but he can be commissioned for a flat fee to arrange this George Gershwin tune for that orchestra. I have no problem with that. Then that arrangement is very popular. The arranger in question, my former student Bill, decides that he wants to build a lot of things in the contract about future uses of the piece, and this and that. And I told Bill, you don't own the work. It's George Gershwin's work. You have a flat fee arrangement, that's all you can do. The orchestra also has the situation where they said, well, now the neighboring orchestra would love to use this piece. And the orchestra starts this scenario where they start renting out this arrangement of Bill's arrangement of the Gershwin piece to a neighboring orchestra. But the orchestra only owns that commissioned work for them. They don't own the right to distribute it to other orchestras
No,
for additional money without contacting the Gershwin estate first.
Correct.
Because the Gershwin estate has the rights to those matters. So these layers of ownership, and these are great areas, but what we've certainly found, and what my student Bill has found, it's not the same Bill, is that the legal hammer still comes down very strongly on the scenario that it's a work made for hire. He was allowed to accept a flat fee to arrange it for that orchestra. And that's really where his rights ended, because he never went to chapel music or Gershwin to get further rights. And the orchestra itself found the hammer falling, because it found out that it didn't have the rights to use that commission work beyond its own orchestra, because that was the level of commissioning that was allowed by law, without asking the Gershwin estate, which has licensed other arrangements for orchestras and has the right to get royalties from that. So
Yeah.
it's very important to track these things as carefully as possible, because the bigger you are, the harder you fall.
Yep, I can't disagree with that.
I appreciate that, because that helps me help Bill, when the bill's like that.
Well, I don't know what to say. I'm agreeing with you that it's important to try to understand the nature of a commission. Yes, I agree with that, yes.
I'm learning why it's important to have a music lawyer on your staff. You get into complicated issues.
Yeah, so I do think, you know, when I teach copyright law to undergraduate students, not law school students. And when I was practicing, I would teach my clients. And what would be the reason I would be teaching someone who is not going to be a lawyer or who is not going to maybe invest, you know, the time and the intricacy in terms of knowledge is it's still worthwhile to understand these issues on some level so that you can have a sense of what your rights are before you even begin a discussion with someone. For example, before you begin a discussion about whether you want to do a work made for hire, to at least know what work made for hire is. Work made for hire is a way for authors to not get copyright ownership, essentially. That the person who creates the work will not own the work if it meets the requirements of work made for hire. So it's just good to know that. You don't have to be a lawyer to know that. It's just a good thing to know. It's a good thing to know what all the exclusive rights are, because that's how you monetize. Every work has a, thank you, every single exclusive right has a revenue stream. So it's good to know that anytime I'm a copyright owner, I've automatically got 5 separate revenue streams, one for each exclusive right, that's associated with one copyrighted work. It's just good to know that. You don't have to be a lawyer to know it. That's just good to know. And then when you want to sit down with somebody like a publisher about how to do the monetization, at least you can say, yes, but we haven't thought about how to monetize in this direction, and we haven't thought about how to monetize in that direction. So yes, I think it's helpful to have a lawyer when it gets to these very technical questions, which copyright clearly can be really, really technical. But it's also helpful to just have a general knowledge, which is why I'm here today. Yes.
So considering you're no longer practicing and we can't be your clients, you teach us,
Yes.
what is the best way for someone to inform themselves about the kind of information you would be sharing under those circumstances?
Yes. So, other than buying my book, in the copyright law, in addition to that, you know how I teach my students, from which I get a great deal of resistance until the end of the semester, and they generally appreciate it, and that is to read the copyright law itself. That way you don't have to take my word for anything that is being said, that you have this point of reference. So reading the copyright law sounds like, oh wow, there's all this technical legislative language that I don't want to have to wade through. But I think you might be surprised at just how straightforward it really is. And some of the terminologies require defining, but Section 101 is a section of definitions. That's all it is. All of Section 101 of the statute is definitions. So that would be one way. Obviously, sitting down and having a session with a lawyer would be another way, but that probably wouldn't be the least expensive way to do it. Yes?
Yeah, I don't know if the purview of this was going to include the relationship of copyright to music publishing and royalty clearance agencies, but I'm interested because as a lyricist, I'm in a kind of gray area with some of what I do, writing vocalese or additional lyrics for existing songs, and I don't know where I stand with that kind of, if it's a song I've collaborated with someone, it's straightforward, but in these other cases, I have no idea where I stand.
Yes. So I mean, with respect to where you individually stand, I can't give you legal advice. So you'd have to seek legal advice as far as that goes, or to try and understand some general concepts, and then go seek legal advice.
I guess I'm wondering if that kind of thing is codified anywhere.
Give me the question again, in terms of whether it's
Okay,
codified.
lyrics that are either an additional lyric to an existing song.
Right, that's it.
Let's say I write a new chorus of
Right.
lyrics where everything happens to
Yeah.
me. Or vocalese, let's say I'm singing a standard, but then I'm singing my lyric for
Yeah.
J.J. Johnson's solo.
Yeah, that's a derivative. That's a derivative work. Anytime you change a work, then you're creating a new work. And that's what we mean. That's one of the exclusive rights that belongs only to the copyright owners. You can't change anybody else's work. You know, one of the clips that I wanted to show you, the only clip that I wanted to show you, which I'm not sure that we'll have time for, which is fine, I can tell you what the clip is and you can check it out for yourself, is from a movie called Copyright Criminals, which is a PBS documentary. And it really is really looking at sampling. But sampling is just the reproduction right. That's all. When you sample somebody else's song, like we said, every use has to find its way into one of those 5 exclusive rights. I'm saying 5 because the 6th one only applies to sound recordings. Every use can be categorized that way if we're talking about a copyrighted work. And so sampling is reproduction. And to the extent that it makes us think about copyright law as a whole, it's worth thinking about whether we really want copyright law to say what it says and operate the way that it does. As an academic, I think copyright law is actually pretty strong. But as an academic, I'm called to question it as well and to think about whether it needs to be reformed and why you want to do that. And I do think, so when I just said to you that any adaptation of somebody else's work is a derivative work, and therefore that's something that you cannot do, which makes, without permission, which makes sampling an infringement when you are doing it in an unauthorized way. And yet, if copyright law is supposed to encourage creativity, then how does that work? Because, as the film suggests, and as Solomon first said, there really is nothing new under the sun. So everybody is kind of building on everybody else's work. Really, we all are, as we create, building on work from, whether we're talking about painting or talking about jazz. Everybody is sort of building on other styles and other ways of bringing works into existence. And so copyright law on the one hand says, yes, I want to encourage people to create new works. And on the other hand says, but you've got to be very careful about how you do that, or else you may be stepping on the rights of a copyright owner. So lots to think about there. Yes?
Yeah, as I understand it, after a certain point, the copyright expires effectively, and then at that point, you could sample work like that without needing permission.
Yes.
Where does that currently stand, especially around most of these jazz works? I mean, is it 75 years after which you can do that? And then how do you know if something's in the public domain, if that's even the right term?
Yeah, that is the right term.
Yeah.
That's true. As we saw in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, it said writers, authors get to have these rights for limited times, but it didn't tell Congress what that limit should be. And it's gone up increasingly over history. So it started out at 14 years. Then in the 1909 Act, it went to 28 plus 28. 1831 Act, it went to 28, then 28 plus 28. Then in the 1976 Act, we got away from the arbitrary number of years and said life of the author plus 50 more years. And then it went life of the author plus 70 years, which is where it currently stands. It's life of the author plus 70. If it's not a work made for hire, or pseudonymous or anonymous works. Those have different terms, and those terms are 95 from date of publication or 120 from creation, whichever expires first. So there is a specific amount of time in which those rights can be claimed by the owners of the copyrights, and then they go into the public domain. But what we've seen is a trend of, enactment. Who knows what the next legislative enactment, which I think something is coming down the pike. I don't have a crystal ball, I don't know, but 1976 was a long time ago, and there's a lot happening with copyright law. And you know where it's coming from. Digital, specifically music and film. The lobbying entities are who are driving that, driving it hard, and I don't see copyright law becoming less restrictive. I see it becoming more restrictive. But we'll see how that shakes out. Who knows? I hope I'm wrong. But anyway, what we've seen is that that time period keeps going up, which means that, I'll be dead before I can sample some of these works, waiting for them to go into the public domain.
Sorry, just how can you tell if something's in the public domain?
So the only way to tell is to calculate the years. You have to know, because some works are still governed by the 1909 Copyright Act, which is not life plus 70. So you have to look at those rules, and you actually have to do the math and know what all of the rules are, and that's the only way you can know. You can hire somebody to find that out for you instead of trying to do the calculation yourself, because you'd hate to calculate wrong and then wind up infringing because the work's really not in the public domain. Yes?
With work for hire, if you are, let's say, commissioned by an orchestra to arrange a Gershwin tune, is it up to the arranger to get rights from the Gershwin estate to make sure that that's all right, or is that up to the commissioner to make sure that it's okay for that work to be in existence?
That sounds a little bit like a legal advice question, a little bit. But, so I'm going to answer it a little bit generally. Whoever wants to make the use is probably going to be responsible for figuring out whether they can make that use or not. Yes?
How do you feel about, in reference to his question of the expiring terms for public domain existence, how do you feel about the work that PDinfo.com does in terms of logging expiring dates and listing public domain tunes as they become available? Do you feel they do a reasonably good job, not so bad?
Yeah, I have used it. I think it's overwhelming for one thing. Really, really hard to find anything in it to figure out where the work even is, if we're talking about the same.
I mean, if you put a tune
service.
into the search engine, for instance, which is the way I tend to use it for a starting point.
Yes.
It seems to be, once I actually got on the phone with the Library of Congress and I asked them how they felt about PDinfo, and they said that in general, although they can't give legal advice, in general, they thought it was an excellent starting place for that very kind of information.
Yeah,
So
just the breadth of that database makes me think that they're at least trying to do a decent job, but I can't endorse it. I don't.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's worthwhile looking into.
Yes, I would check any database that I had access to if I really needed to know, but then I'd verify it.
Thank
Yes.
Is putting things on YouTube infringement?
Yes. So YouTube, one of my favorite technologies is YouTube, and probably yours too. So it depends on whether it's your work or somebody else's work. If it's your work, then clearly it's not a problem. If it's somebody else's work and you don't have permission to do it, it's probably an infringement. Because how do we define infringement? We didn't get to that. We didn't get to a lot of stuff. But an infringement is really just a violation of any one of the exclusive rights. So to the extent that you are using, performing, distributing, creating derivative work, displaying, reproducing somebody else's work, which uploading is a reproduction. So yes, it could be. Whether you will be liable or YouTube is a different story. YouTube was sued. That case was settled. So I have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to put the kibosh on questions. Just to say, I actually, which is fine, because I think that we kind of got to where I would have gotten, but we took a different route, and that's entirely okay. In terms of intersections of jazz with copyright law, I do think those of us who are in this room because we love jazz. We think that it is an art form that is highly unique and it has a really special place in American music history, which I agree with, which is why I'm here too. I agree. But in terms of the distinctions and what makes jazz different from other art forms from a business perspective, it really is not different from any other genre. So it's still subject to all of the same copyright law rules and all of these questions that require knowing. In order to answer them, we just need to know what the rules are, some of which we looked at today. We didn't get to look at all of them. But to the extent that we know what the answer to these rules are, and we know whether those intersections really exist, going back to Kenny G, just to close out on Kenny G, because we wouldn't want to leave him out of this equation. Is there a copyright law issue that is invoked with him choosing to basically sample Louis Armstrong music? Yes?
No.
Yes?
As long as you paid for it.
As long as it's licensed, it's fine. So even if you don't like some artistic direction that a particular artist has chosen to go in, doesn't mean that they have violated the law. And so you could do the same. That's the business issue. To the extent that it makes sense for you to avail yourself of somebody else's work, you can do that if it makes sense for you from a business perspective, as long as you understand the rules that copyright law sets forth. Thank you.